Hey there friends, and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about all of the teased characters and maps in Marvel Rivals. This is a follow-up to the previous video that's on screen right now, and it does include most of the characters from that video, with the addition of a few that I missed that some viewers pointed out, and some I had unintentionally left out of that video, plus some newly mentioned ones. I've also added in all of the locations mentioned to give a bit more reason to watch this video if you've watched the previous one. I'll also have some footage of the new characters playing in the background as well. Now, it seems fairly likely that all or at least most of the characters in this video are coming because previous Venom, Jeff, Thor, Winter Soldier, and Captain America were all teased in the logs, which most of these are as well. As for the maps, it seems relatively likely for them to be added, with at least 3 being prominently hinted at in trailers, and 1 being confirmed, which is Wakanda. Some of these locations are new mashups of existing locations, and some are entirely new, which makes this a bit more interesting as well. Now, one last thing, if you do enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Only around 8% of the people watching this are subscribed, so go ahead and click that because we're going to be doing more stuff like this. And also leave a comment because comments actually really help the video get shown to more people. And lastly, I know that this was a lot and a really long intro, but if you really want to help the channel, you can become a channel member for a few dollars and get early access to videos, ad-free versions of all videos, extended videos, and a lot more. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. First off, we have Doom and Doom 2099. Starting off with Doom 2099, in the alpha test, there were models for Doom 2099 Doombots, which were on the training and tutorial, and has some art for the Doombots featured on a map. And both of the Dooms are talked about frequently in the lore pages and also appeared in one of the trailers. Now, our first map is Valhalla Sky City, which is mentioned as a hovering city and the base of Doom 2099. Seeing as this is the base of one of the 2 main villains, it seems highly likely that we will eventually see this in the game. The same goes for Latveria, which is briefly seen in a trailer here behind the normal Doom. I can't see us not getting this eventually as well. Then we have Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four. Now, we only get direct mentions of Reed and the group of the Fantastic Four as a whole, but with the main villain of the game being multiple Dooms, it seems fairly likely that all 4 will be coming at some point, possibly even being released at the same time as the new film. You can also see Spider-Man 2099 on the Tokyo maps, which I don't think is coming as a separate character, but likely just is coming as a skin for Spider-Man in the same way that the Bagman Spider-Man and Spider-Punk 2099 exist separately from our main Spider-Man and are both skins. Then we have Spider-Punk, which, yes, I know I just mentioned the Spider-Punk 2099 skin, but Peter directly mentions Hobie in the description of the Spider-Punk 2099 map, saying he wishes Hobie could see this. So that Spider-Punk does exist in some way, but Spider-Punk 2099 is a separate character, which is possibly also a Hobie Brown. Then we have Miles Morales, who is not seen or mentioned directly, but the skateboards here are designed off of him, making it possible he could come, maybe as a skin or a full character. But devs have said that they probably won't be doing more spiders anytime soon, as there are a lot of Marvel characters to go over. Next is Kirk Connors, aka the Lizard, who is mentioned to be working for Tony to try and develop a vampire cure, but it's possible he could transform into the Lizard and become playable. Maybe they could do it in a similar way to the Hulk / Bruce Banner character. Next, we have a ton for Null, the god of the symbiotes. From the lore text, we learn Venom plans to kill Null to prevent a vision he saw of the future. Star-Lord, Groot, and Rocket all crash on Clintar, the symbiote homeworld, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Adam Warlock also has plans to defeat Null, so it's likely that all of these characters will end up working together in some way. Null could very easily just be a character for the story, but with Loki and Hela both being villains for the story and playable, it is possible he could come alongside other story villains that I'll talk about in a little while. Now, Clintar, the home of the symbiotes, is mentioned a ton, and it seems like it'll play a large part in the storyline of the game, so it seems very likely it will appear. Next is Morbius. Morbius in Spider-Man's lore saves Peter from some vampires because he's not a real vampire, but just happens to have a lot of vampire-like powers and stuff. But the other vampires don't like him because he's not a real vampire. Then we have Blade, who isn't outright mentioned, but after Spider-Man and Morbius decide to team up, Spider-Man says this is going to be a tough conversation with you-know-who, which to me sounds like Blade, as Blade usually doesn't understand that Morbius is not a real vampire. Next is Cloak and Dagger. These two are helping out with the vampire attacks in New York City and trying to stop the vampires, alongside Spider-Man and other unmentioned heroes. Then we have Moon Knight, who isn't mentioned directly, but Khonshu is mentioned, and Wanda mentions a loose cannon who is guided by the moon, and that she hopes that he's both alive and not completely insane yet. Additionally, in the last video, I thought that this was Khonshu, but some other people pointed out that this looks more like Thoth, another Egyptian god, and some other stuff from that specific video. The figures at the end of the trailer that Doom has are all different beings, mostly being gods. Now, huge shout out to Alex7 on Twitter. First off, we have Bast, then Thoth, which I mentioned a second ago, then Khonshu, the only one I actually kind of got right in that video. And the next two, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce just because I'm gonna get it wrong. There's also the Loki statue, which obviously would represent Loki, and this spider statue, which they say is most likely the Great Weaver. And lastly is the Hydra figurine, which transitions into a logo of Hydra in that trailer. Now, that Hydra logo at the end of the trailer is not actually a Hydra logo. Instead, it is actually Hive. And I missed this in the last video. Now, when I had originally saw that it wasn't the normal skull logo, I had thought of Hive since it was different, but I didn't remember the comic design, only the show one, which doesn't really look like this. But if you look at the comic design next to this, you can see that they are exactly the same. Now, if you don't know who Hive is, it is essentially a being created by Hydra, and it's a parasite of sorts, kind of similar to the symbiote, so maybe it could come to the game. In Wanda's lore, the second part of her hero story is labeled as Snows of Wondergore Mountain, which we don't know anything about why she's there because it's not available yet, but she would most likely go on this journey with Strange, as they seem to be on a mission of some sort with the whole Darkhold situation. Then we have Dracula, who is mentioned a lot and basically has taken over New York. And I've talked a lot about New York here, and it's also shown in the trailer, so it's extremely likely that we will get a map there. Not only that, it's likely that there will be more maps for this location than others, because a lot of specific parts of New York could work for this, and a lot are mentioned. First off is Avengers Tower, which is currently a stronghold being used by the Avengers to both try and stop Doom and stop the vampire. The Baxter Building is also mentioned, which is being used for essentially the same thing. Then we have the Sanctum Sanctorum, which is shown in a trailer and mentioned in the lore as well. And lastly, we have Dracula's castle. And yeah, Dracula moved his castle to New York. All three of those could easily be their own separate maps, and I could also see the Sanctum Sanctorum map maybe starting in the Sanctum with a cargo type mode before going through a portal or something and going to somewhere like the Dark Dimension. We also could get a more generic New York map going through buildings and streets like the one Tokyo map, maybe even featuring the sewers of New York, as that is mentioned briefly in the lore, as is Central Park, which could also be part of this map. Now, with these New York maps, it's likely they will all be set at night, as in the story for the game, we know Dracula has obtained the Darkhold and has created a endless night using it, and also likely used it to move his castle to New York. Next is Elsa Bloodstone. In Jeff's lore, he thinks about multiple of his friends, one of which is Elsa, who could definitely fit into the whole vampire storyline. Next is Squirrel Girl, who is mentioned to be helping Reed Richards and Tony Stark to transport materials using her squirrels. Jeju Island is mentioned briefly, but I don't see this being added, honestly. It's basically just a random real-life island, so not one I really see being added as a map to the game. In Loki's lore, he's looking into the future, and we get mentions of quite a few characters. Is Surtur, who's also shown on the Asgard map and seemingly made some sort of deal with Loki. Then we have Laufey, the king of the Frost Giants, who is mentioned. The Dark Elves as a whole are mentioned, as are the Dwarfs and the Kree, as well as the Eternals, oddly enough. Karnilla, the Queen of the Norns, is mentioned as well, with Loki wanting to team up with her. And Heimdall is also mentioned, all in this one lore page. Now, all of these don't seem super likely, and mostly feel like Easter eggs as they're very quickly mentioned and moved over, but it's possible a couple could make it. Hell is also mentioned quite a lot, and I could see this easily being made into a map for the game. Then we have Psylocke, who was teased in one of the trailers and is teased in Magneto's lore as a telepathic ninja that is trapped in a strange world of unholy amusements, which from the lore with Mantis we know to be the Collector's theme park. She also has the name of a version of Psylocke from the Demon Days universe. The Collector is mentioned a good amount as well, but I don't necessarily see him being an actual playable character, but it is technically a possibility, and he is mentioned, so I thought I'd bring that up. Now, in the lore, once again, Jeff, Mantis, and Psylocke break out of the Collector's theme park, which is an entirely new place, which to me sounds pretty interesting, as they mentioned some sort of an arena, and the name alone makes this a pretty interesting possibility for a map. Next, we have Wolverine, who is teased both on the 2099 map with this poster, but also is in Magic's and Magneto's lore, and even uses Magic's portal, which in my opinion, Wolverine would fit perfectly as the last part of Magic's team up, though Psylocke could easily work with this as well. And I also wanted to mention, in my opinion, he could work as the last part of the Scarlet Witch Magneto team up because it is labeled as Metallic Chaos. Now, Limbo is mentioned quite a bit in the lore as well, and could definitely make for an interesting map if added, and I imagine that there would be some sort of environmental hazards with like fire and lava and that kind of stuff. Now, a young female mutant is also mentioned to have gotten lost in Limbo in the lore, and Wolverine, Magic, and Wanda end up bringing her to Krakoa. Now, I don't know if this is someone or not. I got a lot of comments last video on who this could be, the most likely being Blink, who I completely forgot about existing, just like Marvel did. But I think it's pretty likely it's just a background mutant and not necessarily meant to be a real character. Phoenix is also teased in Magneto's lore, just like Psylocke, and he's mentioned as a powerful cosmic presence determined to burn the darkness out of the sky. Is pretty interesting. Next is Quicksilver, who is teased on a sign on the 2099 map, and Deadpool, who is also teased on the 2099 map, and he is also mentioned in Jeff's lore when he's thinking about some of his friends. Next is Silver Samurai, who has multiple teases on the 2099 map, and if he is added, he could, in my opinion, once again, be part of the Metallic Chaos team-up. Colossus is also mentioned in Magic's dialogue, which could work, and once again, could be a part of the Metallic Chaos team-up, and if they do add Colossus, they could do a really cool thing here where they do the whole Wolverine being thrown by Colossus and have the fastball special literally be a team-up thing, which is like one of the most iconic team-up things in general with Marvel, so please do this. So Netties, if you're watching this video, do this please. Now, Krakoa and Arakko are mentioned frequently, and these islands are both sentient, which is I'm not going to go over right now, and home to mutants. In the lore, a temporal storm moved Krakoa to the future, and it's now in 2099. Now, it's not mentioned where Arakko ends up, or if it survived the storm or whatever, but it seems pretty likely we will get Krakoa, but I'm not sure about Arakko. Then we have Drax and Gamora, who are both mentioned in dialogue, and I don't see us getting them super soon just because we already have quite a few Guardian characters in the game with Mantis, Adam Warlock, Star-Lord, Groot, and Rocket, which is just kind of a lot already, but I can definitely see them coming eventually. Next one is a long shot, but the third part of Iron Man's hero story is titled The Dream of Jarvis, which could be a hint at Vision, as they did have Jarvis become Vision in the MCU movies, but the way this is titled as The Dream of Jarvis, that sounds kind of evil monologue-y nothing to me. And it makes me think that maybe in this weird timeline, Jarvis becomes Ultron, but I don't know. Then we have Black Widow, who is teased on the 2099 map and mentioned in Magneto's and Punisher's lore. She seems to be leading the resistance against Doom 2099 with the help of Punisher and others. Next is Hawkeye, who maybe is in 2099 as there is an archery range in the 2099 map, and it would make sense for him to be alongside Widow there. Another character that is shown on the 2099 maps is White Rabbit, oddly enough. And while I wouldn't think that this is a super likely character, games like this are always trying to kind of balance male and female characters as much as possible, and there's definitely a bit of a lack of female characters, so who knows, maybe she will be added to the game. Next is Los Diablos Missile Base, which is mentioned in the lore, and after the whole time stream entanglement has transformed into a demonic battleground covered in red sand, and both Hulk and Thor end up here in the story, and in my opinion, this sounds like the game's version of the whole Planet Hulk stuff. Hercules is also mentioned briefly in an outfit for Scarlet Witch, and in my opinion would be a pretty good choice to have in the game. Red Skull is mentioned in the new Captain America lore briefly, as are the Howling Commandos from World War II, as well as a new group of Howling Commandos that are in the 2099 timeline, because this game's version of Captain America was not found until 2093, so he actually never ended up with the Avengers in this world. However, it is unlikely, in my opinion, that any of the Howling Commandos are playable. However, Red Skull could definitely make sense, and we definitely do need more villains in the game. Next is Kate Bishop, who is mentioned in Jeff's lore, but we don't know where she currently is. And just like her, Gwenpool is also mentioned in Jeff's lore, and once again, we don't know where she is. Next is Daredevil / Elektra / Iron Fist on the 29/Iron Fist. On the 2099 map, there's a shop owned by the Hand or styled after them, and they are very closely related to the Hand, so maybe that's a hint to one of them coming. Then we have Shuri, who is mentioned specifically, a future 2099 version of her, who is alongside T'Challa on the future space Wakanda. Now, obviously, we've now seen Wakanda in the latest trailer, which is now located in space, but we've seen only one map. And currently, every location in the game has had 2 maps, with Yggdrasil / Asgard having 2, and Tokyo 2099 having 2. So it's very likely we get another one for the Galactic Empire of Wakanda as well. Next is Odin, who is currently trapped in the Odin Sleep, but maybe will come out of the Odin Sleep later and become playable. The second part of Rocket's hero story is labeled as Half-World Story. This is likely, in my opinion, to just be a flashback origin story, essentially. Maybe he's recounting it as it is labeled as story. And the Mirror Dimension and Cloak's Dark Force Dimension, which is different from the Dark Dimension, and both of those are mentioned. But considering that the Dark Force Dimension is essentially a void of nothing, I don't see that coming at all. And the Mirror Dimension is also pretty unlikely, in my opinion. And lastly is Ghost Rider, and this is obviously a stretch. This could just be a random drawing, but in my opinion, it kind of looks like Ghost Rider, and I really want Ghost Rider, so I'm putting this in the video. Anyways, that is going to be it for this video. Relatively long video, but hopefully you guys all enjoyed it. We're going to be doing lots more talk about this game and a lot of lore stuff, as I personally am really interested in the story for the game and the future of the game in general. Anyways, thanks for watching, and leave a like, subscribe, etc., and I will see you guys all next time. Goodbye.